Welcome. In this tutorial, we're just going to take a look at compositing together multiple movie files into a single finished video. So remembering that in Harmony, we want to work on using individual scenes in their own project files. We render those out as movies and we put those all together in a program like After Effects or Adobe Premiere. So first off, I do want to just add a camera, and we are going to animate the camera here. So I will click on the plus and add in a camera. Now I do have camera matte turned on or off so we can see. Right now, notice how it has the pink, similar to that kind of pinkish color when we have object layers selected. But we do need to add a peg layer to it if we wish to animate it. I choose the peg. We see that that camera matte turns bright yellow. I'm going to turn it off because that is a little bit hard to look at. First thing I want to do is to add a keyframe for my camera. So what I am going to do is I am going to go to this point here, and my transform tool, I'm just going to do a little push in just so there's just a little bit of activity happening right there. And on the next frame, I'm going to put in a keyframe, and this time I am going to go way in and I am going to rotate and reposition our camera framing on this. And with that, I'm going to go until the end of that so I can tell I'm looking at the waveform, so I know what the audio is. This is the bleep in the audio, and we'll add in another keyframe here. Now what I want to have happen is I want this to be a hold keyframe. So I want to hold on that position. I don't want to animate, I just want it to be steady. And then I'm going to go back to my previous frame. So I'm just going to copy that keyframe, and I will go here and paste that keyframe, and now we can see how it has been reset. And with that, I will turn this back to a motion keyframe. So I'm going to just space out my time so I can see that I want to repeat this process when I get to this point out here. So we could let this just do some real gentle movement with the camera. So if I want to move just gently across over here, and we can see, so that's at right around 175. Now we'll go out, move our time indicator to out there, maybe just put a little bit of rotation in on the camera so we can see. Now one thing to keep in mind is if you don't insert your keyframe as a full keyframe, if you just start rotating on one, moving on another, your rotation is going to happen across a lot of time. So for this, I am going to go to this frame here, and I'm just going to be rotating as much as I can without, well, that's too far. We lost our framing over there. So we're just rotating. I'll rotate a little bit more and reposition the frame just so it fits. Looks like we need to pull it back just a fraction. Okay, right there. Now next keyframe right here. This is where I am going to strongly punch in this time. We will position it like so. And this will be a hold keyframe, so it's a stop motion keyframe, so it can go all the way across there. And now the bleep is going to finish. And now if I want to go back to this frame, I can just copy that keyframe, of course, go to the end of this, paste that keyframe in. So we can see if I scrub how it pops in, and then we're back to here. And now we can just put a keyframe here. Well, looks like we want to shorten up our scene. Let's find out where. Oh, so this is going to be the end of our scene because that is now where my background, which is just a running the video end. So I'll just put a little stop in here at frame 250. Okay, we just want to remember that, because when we go to export this out, so again, we're just doing kind of just a real gentle motion happening here. So if we play it,
you're not shutting this movie down! Ever! And if you don't do it, you're fired! And I see you do it again, you're gone! I will!
Okay. So now I can see how it's working. I have my camera, I have my background, and what I want to do is to export out my movie. So we do have two options. We can export from our right node, or if we're okay with what we're doing, we can just export out our movie. So I choose what I'm trying to do, and now giving it a name. I'm putting it into the jobs folder in my project folder, and I will remember I want to export out to frame 240. We'll keep our resolution the same. In this case, we are doing an MPEG. We could do QuickTime if we want to do a slightly higher quality. So if we do QuickTime ProRes, well, it's not slightly higher, it's significantly higher quality, but it is a much larger file. And if we do choose our ProRes options, we do have an option at that point. We can export. If we have no background layer and it's black, we can create a transparent background layer. So then I could composite transparently with video backgrounds inside of, say, After Effects or Premiere. Now I've made a second version of my project. This time I'm going to start at frame 250 so we can finish the rest of our soundbite, since we did get a little bit cropped because our video background was too short. So we'll use this as our second scene. So I now just have a still image that's going to ride in the background. Once again, we need to add a camera, put a peg on the camera, and now I am going to put a keyframe here, and we're starting our scene at 350, and we are going to be able to go until 317. So with that, I'm going to animate out my camera. I'm going to just push it in a little bit on the unicorn. So again, we have keyframe pushing in. Now that I have pushed in, what I'm going to do is go to this point here, insert another keyframe, and we're going to just put a little gentle unsettling rotation on so we can see how it's rotating. And now as we move to the end, I think I'm going to push in tighter, rotate even more so it's a stronger rotation to end. So that's going to give me what I need for that second one. So I have a second scene to composite. Once again, we'll export out a movie. This time I will call this Cam 2. Again, it's going into my jobs folder, and we go from frame 250 all the way to 317. Just confirming, yep, stop is at 317, and click OK, and now we wait for the render to happen. So when we launch After Effects, which we can do After Effects, you can do Premiere, but we're going to do After Effects in this example. We have our basic interface that comes up, and we also have the start screen that comes up and looks like this. Now inside the start screen, what we would want to choose is new project. Now when I choose new project, it brings me here, and what really should happen before you do anything else is you should save your project. So After Effects, we have to remember, is the project file is just simply a timeline. That timeline will point to any of the assets that you put into it. So if I want to save this, I can go save as and choose save as. And now it pulls up and I can choose where I want to save it. I'm going to save it into my Unicorn project where I'm working. I'm going to go into the jobs folder because that is where I have some additional videos. I have my Cam and Cam 2 video renders I made. I have some other ones that were some other samples that were being made with the Unicorn. So we can just ignore those right now. So this is where we're going to combine my Harmony scenes. Let's say scenes combo. Call it what you will. But again, this makes an AEP file. That's your After Effects file. The After Effects file is useless without any the assets you put into it. So if you share it with someone, share the whole project folder. Otherwise, it will be worthless. So it comes up and now it looks about the same, except now we can see we have a saved thing. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to bring in the assets that we're going to be working with. And those are the video files. We could also make a new composition. The composition is the timeline, and we will need one of those as well. So to import, we can just double click inside our project window on the left hand side. And by saving our project file into our folder where we have our assets, we'll notice that it automatically went to that location, which is super cool. So it doesn't just choose some random thing, then you have to hunt all of your desktop for it. So I can Control or Command click to choose separate video files. If they're continuous in order, I can shift click and it selects them. Both ways are acceptable. I can choose create composition. I'm not going to right now. I'm going to just leave these separate because we're going to make our own comp just to see how that works. Now we will see, we can look here, we can see that is the size 1920 by 1080 on it, so we know that that is what we've made. We can also, if we look at the other specs as it's showing up here, we will see that it is telling us that we do have a frame rate of 24. So we need to put these together. A couple things that we don't know is we don't know exactly how long they are, so we would have to kind of get some information on them. We can see we have an in point and out point. I currently in After Effects I work in frames, so it's giving me numbers in frames, not in time code. So if I look under the new comp or the composition pull down menu, we do have new comp there. I can also click on this icon here to create a new composition, and Control N or Command N if you're working on a Mac does the same thing. So window that pops up looks like this, and I'm going to call my first comp main comp. My default is coming at 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames per second because that's what I used last time. You can look at the other presets, 2997, which is the 30 frames per second essentially. 25 frames per second if you're working over in Europe. We're not, so we're going to stick with our 24, and that matches what we did inside of Harmony. Our project in Harmony was also 1920 by 1080, so we're good there. Duration, so my duration is set to 720 frames, which we know is too many frames, so we could do the math, and we know that we do have 317 frames in this particular example because that's what it totaled when we worked in Harmony, so I could just enter in that 317 frames. Now, if yours is not showing up frames and is showing up in time code, we'll show how that is different, because if I hold down Control on Windows, Command on Mac, and single click on the time code, we can see how it switches from frames to time. So now we can see the timing that I have here. I have one is 10 seconds, one is 2 seconds and 20 frames. So that gives me a total of 12 seconds and 20 frames is what my project is. And if we look at, say, making a new comp right now we can see that our time code is switched to hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. The final two numbers are not time, but they are how many frames. So it's going to be 0 through 23. 24 brings you into the next second. So I'm going to just go back to frames because that's what I'm happy working in. And now to add this video file to my timeline, I can just simply drag it down here and boom, it adds it in. Now if I take the next one and drag it over into the timeline, it's like boom, it adds it in. It's on a second layer and I can just move that over. Alright, so it does seem... Harmony was 317 and now we're getting 308 frames. So I'm not entirely certain why that's happening, but we do see that our time, our artwork is here.
You're not shutting this movie down! Ever! And if you don't do it, you're fired. And I see you do it again, you're gone. I will massacre you! I will you up! Should we? We are not shutting...
Okay. So we're able to combine our layers together. Everything sequenced. Our frames are lining up and it does seem that all is right with the universe. So what this also means is if I wanted to have an additional scene that had titles or credits that I don't do in Harmony and I do in After Effects, I could add that here as well. I could make an additional comp, animate that, put that on the timeline, shift things over, adjust the timing of my comp. So we have pretty much an unlimited number of options available to us to create the effects that we are looking for. Final thing that we do need to do to get it out of here is we need to export it. So we have options. We can add to the media encoder queue and we can also add to the render queue. So both of those are acceptable ways of working. So if I go to the render queue, it pops up my render queue menu down here. We can see our output module where we now have options we can choose. So I can choose, hey, what size options do I want? I can click here, choose my format, H.264. I could export out just the audio from it. I could do a JPEG sequence, a QuickTime file. So we have lots of options available to us as we're trying to export it out. The final thing we have to do if we want to run our render queue is we have to click on output 2 and then we choose where it's going to go and we give it a name. And I'll just call mine main uni, click OK. And now we see the buttons are lit up. I can click render and it's going to render this out. And I could also queue it up in Adobe Media Encoder. So when you see AME, that's what it stands for. So I will just hit render. Should go pretty quick here because it's not very long. We're at 12 seconds. So we just wait and watch our progress bars. It seems, this is IT 101 where you just watch progress bars. And now we get that magical sound out of After Effects with the bell chime. So if we now wanted to export this out using Media Encoder, we can click on that and then we do have to wait for Media Encoder to launch. And I haven't launched mine apparently since it last updated, so now I have to wait for it to verify. So qualitatively, is there a difference using Media Encoder versus the standard render queue? Media Encoder has access to more presets that can make things a little bit easier for some people, but as far as the output file that you're going to get, there is no real difference. There are some QuickTime options that are easier to access if you're trying to do specific things with it that will be easier inside of After Effects natively. So 5 minutes later it shows up here and now I can see it looks about the same where we're choosing. I click and choose what kind of format that I'm looking for. So we see we have a lot of different video options. I can choose a preset. So I often use the YouTube 1080 preset because I post my videos on YouTube, so it makes sense to do that. And finally, you figure out where it's going to go. By default, we'll see that it's going into some random folder on it, which I look at this vars folder, blah, 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 AME, comp1. It's like, okay, that would be really not fun to find. So, which I actually think that might be, yeah, Comp 1. That's an older one because we don't have Comp 1. What we call ours main, so that is an older one. So we'll just cue that out of there and say yes. All right. But here, so if your project has not been saved, it puts it into very random places. If your project has been saved, it does make a AME folder and it puts temp file in there, and then when it saves, so that's where it's trying to save it. And I will just call this main AME right here, and I'm going to just put it at the top level. I'm not going to put it in the AME folder. No, now we'll put it not in it, next to it. Again, it doesn't really matter. Final thing to make it happen is you need to click the start button. So this is the go button, the little green triangle. You click that and you watch the progress bar happen on the bottom. When we are rendering out of Adobe Media Encoder, it has to connect to the Dynamic Link server. So even though you have opened up Media Encoder and After Effects on the same computer, it's actually contacting one of Adobe's dynamic servers to be able to bridge the data flow between those two apps. And sometimes it works. Looks like it is working here. I've had on some computers where it's very disagreeable and the Dynamic Link server fails. It doesn't work, so you have to use the native render queue option. So, two ways to get your video file out of After Effects. It really is as easy as make a composition. You drag your different videos that you've made in Harmony for each of your scenes to the timeline, sequence them, and you are good to go. So good luck and make some movie magic.